Stay tuned, stay tuned, stay tuned. I am here with the coach, John Brent.
And I'm here with the vet, Mr. Ian Griffin, and special guest.
Yes, Mr. Terry Waldrep, the superintendent for Pittsburgh Independent School District, is here with us today. How you doing, Terry?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Man, we wanted to talk about this hot-bedded topic. It's hit the social media side and got all Camp County people concerned, which is this new bond for the school district. And so we just wanted to give you a chance to talk about it, get some real facts out there, and not some of all the gibberish that I've seen on the social media pages. And then we're going to ask you a bunch of questions to hit you in the kidneys to make sure you're on your feet.
Absolutely.
So we'll
Sounds
let you have
good.
it.
All right. Well, I appreciate you guys
Yes, sir.
asking me to be here. And, you know, I think the biggest thing that we're trying to get across, that I want to get across to everyone, first of all, I deliver the information. That's it. You know, people think a superintendent puts a bond out there. Well, you know, the bond isn't for me. I don't get anything out of it. You know, this bond is for the students, for the community. I'm a taxpayer just like everyone else, but it's my job to give the facts and give the information and then present it to the voters. And not only me, you know, there's a committee that was involved in this. There's people throughout the community that have been involved in this. So it's, and that's the other thing I want people to understand. This has not been a overnight thing. This has been going on for several years, us working on this, putting it together and planning and working on it. And I think that's the biggest thing as we got into this. And one thing is a little different from me. I have a little different vested interest in the Pittsburgh community because I'm from here. You know,
Sure.
This is my community also, and my kids went to school here. My wife went to school here. Our families went to school here. So, you know, I want to give the facts of what's going on. I want people to understand the situation, you know, the schools are in, and to be able to let them to make their own decision based off of that. But the other thing, the driving factor in all this has been for us is to come up with a plan. Let's have a plan. What is the plan for Pittsburgh ISD? What is our vision? What is the direction that we want to go? Because school facilities, as you all know, are expensive. And they're expensive to keep up. You know, we run 5 campuses. Really, you could say 6 campuses with alternative schools, maybe 7 campuses with our admin buildings. That is a lot of buildings, a lot of things to keep up and keep going. And if you know, we heard years ago in the education profession, if you're not moving forward, you're going backwards. You're not ever going to stay the same. You've got to be moving forward. You've got to be doing something. And with that many facilities, if you don't have a plan and a long-range vision and goals and where you're headed and what you're doing, you're going to get behind. And that's the first part of this, because that's one thing that I've heard and things that I've seen over the years is what is our vision for 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road? And as I mentioned, Pittsburgh ISD did a great job. For years, we had the old high school where I went to junior high on the corner downtown. You know, it was built, I'm having a hard time getting the exact dates, but somewhere in the 20s, maybe early 30s. We moved in the new high school, you know, 40, 50 years later in 1973. The elementary, intermediate campuses were built in the 40s, in I think 1940s and 1950. The junior high in 1980, and then the last campus, the last major project the school's done was in 1997, 25 years ago, the primary campus. So we did a great job for a long time, but now it's time because, you know, we're getting behind. Right. And that's a big part of it. But what is our plan? Because what had happened is, and give you a little bit of history on the bonds of Pittsburgh over the last, let's just say, since the primary was built. You know, we had a fire in the old high school. I think it was in the mid-90s, 96, 97. A lot of the high school was redone at that time, but it was redone with insurance money and the money available for them to get it back up and running and get kids back in the classroom, because a lot of kids were displaced, I think, in churches and things throughout town. So they had to get it up and going. Well, there was a bond, I believe it was in 2000, about $11 million bond that was tried to pass to help renovate and fix a lot of that. Well, that bond failed. Came back in 2008, 8 years later, and tried to pass a bond for a new high school at that point. That bond failed. So the position the district was in was, what do we do now?
Yeah.
You know, we've got to address some situations. So in 2013, a $10 million bond was passed. 2016, an $11 million bond was passed. And when you're talking about whole campuses, in today's world, a $10 million bond, $11 million bond is not going to make a dent. Yeah, and what it's going to do is it's going to allow you what's happened at the high school level. And this kind of goes to the next point that the committee, and then we're looking at, was that it addressed some situations. We built a vocational building, a health science building, a life skills building. These are outlying buildings, not part of the main campus there. I'm sorry, you had a question.
I do. I got something on the bonds. Is what I hear a lot is people say this $88 million, and can't we just do a $20 million bond? Well, we tried to do several bonds. We wouldn't pass those, you know. So now we're doing those and not passing those, but we want to do those now, but we didn't want to do them before. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like,
Right.
oh, now that we got the big sticker price, now we want to go all of a sudden.
Well,
do those back
and,
in, you know.
and understand this about sticker price, because that's a good point. When you look at 88 million, you think, wow,
Yeah.
you know, that, and it is a lot of money. But if you look at what has happened over the last few years, several school districts that passed bonds and built things just 3 years ago for $200 square foot, under $200 square foot. Now you're pushing $400 square foot. So that's made it. But then also think about your tax base. When, let's say in 2008, I think that total bond package was about 35, 36 million. The high school was around 28 million or whatever for a new high school. That was the price then, but here was your tax base was a lot lower as far as the values that Camp County brought in at that time. Now you've got an $88 million bond, but over the last 4 or 5 years, Camp County's tax base has grown tremendously, so it's all relative, the tax base to the amount of the bond, and we're in good shape right now as far as our tax base and the price of the bond to be able to handle it. So that's all relative, but that goes back to my point. What's happened to the high school campus, and it's the largest campus, it's the biggest campus we have, and it's 50 years old, is it's so spread out that because we've had to piecemeal and add and fix a building here and building there, and if this bond doesn't pass, we're going to have to do something similar. You're not addressing your main campus, so your campus is so spread out. So the problem we're having now is, you know, top and foremost on our list when we build anything new is safety and trying to get everybody back in close. It's the only campus that we don't have that we can't almost completely enclose under one roof or one section where kids can go from building to building or classroom to classroom and never leave the main area. Yeah. So we're so spread out that we're trying to get it all back in. And if you've ever been down Texas Street, you know the issue up and down the Texas Street with parent drop-off, pickup. There's no dedicated place for that. There's no dedicated visitors parking.
It was a nightmare in the 80s. And
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
so many more students now. And, you know, I've always said this. I said this a year ago when he wrote something after Mr. Watson passed away. You know, Pittsburgh to me is the greatest little town in the greatest country in the world. It's always been this pride place. We all grew up here. I mean, I was born here in 1970 in the hospital that used to be up, you know, past where the school is. We've all went to school here. And there's this pride, pit pride that we've always had. And, you know, when you think about Pittsburgh High School, it's some of the greatest times of our lives. I know Vet and I have talked about this many times. It's time for this place to come up a little bit because where I live in White House ISD, and I worked as a teacher in TISD, just in the last 7 or 8 years, both of those places have updated Robert E. Lee, John Tyler High School, and White House High School. And you see the difference it makes, not only just with the students, but the community and the pride that you have. I mean, yes, it's going to cost money. Everything costs money. And in the last couple of years with, you know, the pandemic and inflation, things cost more money. But are we going to let our kids suffer because we're looking at a scary sticker price? Or are we going to try to go forward and make Pitt, you know, continue to be the greatest little, what I call the greatest little town in the world?
One thing I'd like to say is, people that know I'm military and done 31 years, and my son went through 8 school districts in 10 years. You know, I mean, 8 school districts, and I will tell you on the status of each one of those school districts, and these were in Europe, and these were all across America, and this isn't to knock Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh would have the lowest structural and facility standing than all of those together that are on military bases, and some of them are old military bases that are about to dwindle down and close out, so the priority wouldn't be there. But Pittsburgh on what's teaching it, and the atmosphere is totally different. But what is actually there as far as facilities, it's the worst one he's had in his tenure, you know, so.
Well, and you bring up some good points with White House and Tyler and taking the models. Obviously, we're not those districts, but you can take the models that a lot of those places have put together. And this is where I go back to, we need a plan. One thing that we don't want to do, and as a taxpayer myself, you don't want the district to keep coming back every 8-10 years for another bond. Right. And we need this and we need that. One reason, and it's not just a high school in this bond, there's some other factors involved with some overcrowding or space constraints at some of the lower level campuses because of a mandatory full day pre-K that the state put in a few years ago has caused our primary campus to be full. So we're looking at alleviating that. Well, you don't want to pass a bond for a new high school and then go right back to the voters in a couple of years and go, man, we need this at the primary. And that's one of those unfunded mandates that the state gives us, that it is a true problem. And so when this package was put together, it was put together with something for all to alleviate our major priorities across the district immediately and not have to go back to the voters over and over again for bonds. And so the models that, for instance, Tyler ISD, they passed a bond back in May, no new taxes. I know Pleasant Grove passed a bond back in May, no new taxes. And that's the goal that we're trying to put forth. This plan that we're trying to put together is a long-range plan for 30, 40, 50 years that hopefully, as we're paying these bonds off, that we don't have to go back to the voters for more bonds, more, to raise taxes, that we can keep paying them off. And typically, to explain a little bit about bonds in the state of Texas, if you're going to do a remodeling or reconstruction, typically those are going to be 20-year bonds. What we did in the 13 or what the board and the past administration did in the 13 and 16-year bonds, those were 20-year bonds. Well, one of them will be paid off in well under 20 years. I believe we only have 9 more years left on it. The other one has 14 years left on it. It was in 2016 with 20-year bond. It will probably be paid off because the money going to pay those off, because our tax base has grown, is going to the principal and knocking those down. Well, look at it this way. Most of us, myself anyway, I have one mortgage. I pay mortgage on one house. A school district has 5 campuses with multiple buildings. So it's very typical in the state of Texas. Probably 90% of the districts in the state of Texas have overlapping bonds. And what that means is, because you have, typically we would have more than one mortgage because we have many buildings and campuses. So what you try to do is have a plan, whereas you're paying one bond down, you're rolling maybe into another one, and your tax base doesn't have to, your tax base is growing and you don't have to go back to the voters. So as what our goal here on this one is, if this bond passes, new construction's typically 30 years. You think about that. The whole high school was 50 years old. So well after years, that's 20 years or more, well after you pay the bond off, you're still in that school. You're getting, you have equity, you have valuable assets in that well past the point. So a lot of people worry about how long we have, but it's very common, and we're in great shape because those other 2 bonds are going to be paid off, fairly quickly as far as bonds are concerned. And then you'll have another bond that you're paying on. Well, those that are paid off, you could easily use that down the road, because we're sitting there with an elementary and an intermediate that were built in the 40s and the 50s that are going to have to be addressed. And then the district did that $10 million and $11 million bond in 13 and 16 addressed. We added a 4th grade wing over there. It addressed some of the new cafetorium that was built. There were several things added on over there to help with that. So the plan is to have this long-range plan and not keep going back to the voters, to have something in place for years down the road, and let's address it now. And now we've got a vision and a plan to move forward with for many years to come.
Terry, my question is what most people in Camp County want to know. What does $88 million get us? What does it get the taxpayer? What does it get the students, the community? What does $88 million get?
This $88 million bond, first of all, it gets us a new high school, which is basically, as I would say, the elephant in the room, because it's your largest campus. It's going to be your most expensive to rebuild and put in place. It gets us a campus that's secured under one roof in one place, and for years to come. And it addresses all those problems with the safety and security and the spreading out and the aging infrastructure of that campus. The other thing that it does is it answers some immediate needs for us down the line. We have a lot of overcrowding at the junior high. If you haven't been in there in the last few years, for instance, the cafeteria can barely hold. Last year, we couldn't hold all the kids. We had to put tables and chairs up in the hallway outside the cafeteria. If people say, well, go to 3 lunch periods or 4 lunch periods to get them all in there. Well, that's true, but there's only so much time in the day. So when you go to those larger lunch periods, you're going to be cutting instructional time out of the other class periods. So it's very overcrowded. We don't have a dedicated life skills unit for our junior high. Our junior high life skill kids go to the high school. They're combined with the high school because that's a separate program, and they have to have their own facilities and their own equipment and different things.
So they're bussed up there daily?
No, they just go there. That's where they show up. They're combined with the high school.
So you have the high school with a exacerbated program in there that it should be about probably 2/3 that.
Exactly. Oh yeah. It's busting at the seams, and we have that new life skills building there, the high school, which is great, but it's overcrowded now because of that. So that's one issue, and then the other issue that we talked about the pre-K. 3 years ago, the state mandated that all districts in the state of Texas accept eligible 4-year-olds for full day pre-K. Used to, that was part-time. You went half a day pre-K. But now you have to go full-time. The state said, we will give you a waiver first 3 years in order for you to do whatever you need to do facility-wise or whatever to be able to accommodate
And that's
that.
ending.
Yes. Well, I'll get to that. We were actually able to get it for a little bit longer. But what happened was we repurposed 3 classrooms. We added 3 more teachers, 3 more aides. And at that level, you're limited. You have 22-to-1 teacher-student ratio at that level. With those classes right now, we're pushing 19, 20 in most of those pre-K classes. So, and we have no more classroom space. So we're full. COVID helped kind of put that on the back burner because a lot of that typically that age group, pre-K and K, those kids were the ones that the parents kept home a lot. They didn't send back. So we weren't real sure on what those numbers were going to look like. This year, we're full blown going, back to normal, and we're pushing close to 100, which is about 15 or so more than what we've been running. If we grow any more at all, we're full. My only other choice is bringing portables over at the primary campus. So that was when the committee looked at it along with the architects, and they said, let's alleviate that. Let's solve that problem at the junior high, the overcrowding. Let's move our 6th graders back to the junior high campus, which if you look at things like pre-athletics, band, those type of things that the 6th graders typically need to be with the junior high kids preparing for high school, it made sense. So let's add to the junior high. Let's bring the 6th graders to the junior high, and then we can move. We don't have to add to the primary. We could bump grade levels from the primary to the elementary, intermediate, move up that way. And that would alleviate that problem. The answer to your question is back in July, the state did it because of COVID and what have you. They did allow us to apply for that waiver again for 2 more years. Oh. So we have until 2025 to answer that problem.
That's not very long. That's
not long at all.
But you got to answer.
Right.
You got to answer because you have to take them. That's mandatory. You have to take them. So the thing there was move the 6th graders back to the junior high. Well, that answers a lot of problems there. First of all, we'll build a new cafeteria. This is part of that bond. Cafeteria at the junior high that's large enough to accommodate 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Reconvert the old cafeteria into a dedicated life skills unit with some other classrooms because when they need more classroom space. Remodeling the restrooms. There's not many restroom bays in the hallways of the junior high. They need more restroom space and add more classroom space to it. So then what that does, moving the 6th grade up from the intermediate, the current 6th grade campus can then take their band areas, and those classrooms they were using for that, and convert those to classroom to give them more space. And we haven't added anything on over there. They've gained more space just by us moving grade levels. And so that answers it's answering problems all the way down the line again, because here's what would happen is if we don't do that, and then in 2 years, our pre-K gets to that point, we got to go back to woters and go, hey, we got to add a wing. We got to, and the committee was like, no, let's fix it now. Let's come up with this long-range vision and plan, have this in place, and let's fix it all right now.
How many more students? I mean, we all went to school in the 80s. I remember the campus, the junior high then in the mid-80s. That was 40 years ago.
Yeah.
But, we had 6th, 7th, 8th there. How many more students do we have, say, now in the junior high and high school than we had in the 1980s? Because it seemed to us then, or at least to me, that we were pretty full then, and those are the same two schools.
The high school is the one I can answer the most. And it's going to be relative to what's happening at the junior high. But when we've gone back, over the last 20-something years, the high school's grown about 100-something kids over the last 20-something years, since the early 2000s. I know when I graduated in 1981, we graduated around 120 kids. Typical senior class for us now is going to range on the average the high 160s, 170s. So if you multiply that by 4 grade levels, you're pushing close to a couple hundred kids.
Wow.
And here's the thing that's going to happen with school and school facilities. Obviously, when you build new facilities, your enrollment's probably going to grow.
Definitely.
If you don't build new facilities, your enrollment's probably going to continue to drop. And you're going to lose them to surrounding districts, some. Or you're not going to get the people moving in the community and coming in. That's going to hurt you there on that end of it a little bit also. So it's.
I have one question that's, I looked at a lot of the social media, the goods and the bads and the uglies, and one of the questions that I didn't know the answer to that someone was asking was, why not a grant? And what is a grant when it comes to something like this? We asked for a bond, but someone had said, well, they heard that you can just ask for a grant and that they just give it to you, which you and I both know that's ridiculous. But so is there a grant? Is there a way to apply for a grant? Has that even been looked at?
We apply for every grant that we're eligible for. And most grants are not going to touch the surface of a school facility. Take for instance right now, the biggest grants that we just had were the ESSER money that came out because of COVID, that the federal government, and you got to remember when you apply for grants, there's stipulations to all of those grants on how you can spend them and how you can use them, especially when they come from
the government does that? Oh, no.
Yeah, especially when they come from the federal government. Yep. But one thing that has helped us, we spent, and I'm going to go back to what we have done throughout a district academically. We're an A-plus district, A-rated district. 96 is our scaled score, which is the top in Region 8. There's one other school, I think Avery School District was 97 maybe. But other than that, we were the top. 96 is the top rated in Region 8. And I say that to say our teachers are doing a great job. And what we've tried to do has been, and if in today's world, recruiting of teachers and certified teachers and quality teachers in the classroom is a major competition throughout the district. Out the state. It's a challenge. And we've done a good job of recruiting new teachers, trying to recruit our homegrown people back here, and then retaining the teachers that we currently have. And so that's helped us a lot. But, one thing we've done, we've invested into our instruction. And with that ESSER money, we put on after-school programming last year, provided transportation for it. We boosted our summer school program huge for what we've ever had in the past, over 400 and something kids. And we bused them. We went almost full day. They were going from like 7:30 to 3:30. We added over $1 million worth of technology into our classroom. Every classroom got those big, nice, what we call BenQ boards.
Yes,
I like interactive boards that, they're fabulous.
And those are all off the grants.
Those are all off of the ESSER grant.
Yeah.
And I've told you before, put this point. I've told you before, in school districts, there's 3 major things: roofs, air conditioning, and parking lots when you're talking about maintenance. And those are your biggest expenses, your largest expenses. For instance, I told everybody last year I put one roof on one wing of the intermediate campus is about $45,000. Well, we have 355 air conditioning units in our district. And those are going to range from your split level systems to your 5-ton, 10-ton, 15-ton rooftop units and what have you. That's millions of dollars. We were able to take 1.2 million of that ESSER and convert it into replacing air conditioning units. I'm replacing units I have one unit that dated back to 1988. We still had several units that were in the 90s. And on the old Freon, which you can't buy or find anymore, if you can do it, it's quadruple cost. So we were able to use a lot of that federal money to address some of those, instruction in the classroom and technology. We went one-to-one Chromebooks. Every kid in the district has a device. We improved our hotspots, and then again, we improved things like our HVAC units. Those are things that people don't see, but they're expensive. Yeah. And it's hard to budget in. And I can talk a little bit about that in a minute if you like, on budget, how school budgets are and how the tax rate works as far as schools are concerned.
I would like to talk that, just say, I'll just throw us in there. Come from the military, we have commonly known 47 different pots of money from the federal government. And we had a guy that made absurd amount of money for our staff. That all he did was go, okay, yeah, you can fix that, but you have to use this money, but you can't use that money. And you can fix that, but that's how detailed. You had to have a freaking darn doctor that was specialized in that field to understand that, to make sure we didn't violate anything.
Make sure you stay in compliance.
Yes, because
exactly.
the second you're out of compliance,
They're
your
gonna
money
pull
the money gets all taken away.
Exactly.
That's just how it is. So anyway,
you're right.
But let's real quick talk about the tax thing so that people can kind of understand really what it means.
How it works.
And how it works.
Okay, first of all, schools have two taxes. There's an M&O tax, which stands for maintenance and operation. That tax is your normal budget tax. That's how we establish our budget throughout the year. And that tax is on mostly salaries. Most districts in the state of Texas, 80 to 85% of that is going to be in salaries, paying payroll. Ours is actually at 74%. The rest of it is used for your instruction, to pay your utility bills, to pay for materials, supplies, and things of that nature. So that's called an M&O tax rate. 3 years ago, in 2019, in that same legislative session where they passed the mandatory pre-K, they passed a property tax relief. So what the state does now is, in the summer, when the Camp County Appraisal District finishes all the Camp County tax base and what our tax values are, they send them to the state comptroller. The state comptroller then certifies those values by July 25th. TEA now takes those values, they look at it and say, here's what Camp County's tax values are. Pittsburgh ISD, here's what your minimum M&O tax rate is going to be. We don't even figure that anymore. Wow. That's calculated for us by TEA based off the certified tax values. 3 years ago, in the 2018-19 school year, Pittsburgh ISD's M&O tax rate was $1.04. That was the minimum. Some school districts went over that. You could have a tax ratification election to go over that and gain more money for your district. We never did. Pittsburgh ISD has been the minimum, $1.04. Well, when that passed, the next year, the 2019-20 school year, that first year of this, the state TEA sent us in, our M&O tax rate was compressed to 97 cents. It went down 7 cents that first year. The next year it went to 94 cents. It dropped 3 more cents. The next year it went to 88, which is this past year, 6 more cents. This year it dropped 3 more cents. We're at 85. Our M&O rate is 85 cents. That is a 19-cent drop in the tax rate of Pittsburgh ISD over the last 4 years. So how does that work? Well, how do people see that? The second tax that people pay is called an INS tax, interest and sinking. That is debt payment tax. That's the one that if the bond passes, that's the tax rate that goes up. And so right now that tax rate is currently 20 cents. So if you add those two tax rates together, that is the total tax rate for PISD. So in 2018-19, we were $1.04 M&O. We were 20 cents INS. Add the two together, the total tax rate for PISD was $1.24. The next year, I told you that went down 7 cents. So the next year, your total tax rate in Pittsburgh ISD was $1.17. The next year was $1.14. This past year was $1.08. this year, the tax rate in PISD will be $1.05. The lowest,
That's what I was,
the lowest of any surrounding area. And you know, we're sitting there with surrounding districts that have passed bonds and have made improvements and,
so it was $1.24 a few years ago, and adding it, you know, just looking at this, if you add in the taxes that this is gonna increase with this bond, it's gonna bring it back to about that?
it's gonna be $1.30.
I mean, that's what I'm saying, you get a brand new school for 6 cents.
6 cents more than what it was, yes.
A few years ago.
A few years ago.
Right.
So, Terry, real quick, I want to ask this, because you explained it the other day, is the M&O, say the teacher's salary is at a certain level and y'all raise so much, and then what the state covers, if you can kind of explain that.
Okay, yeah, and going back to the M&O rate, people, because I get questioned all the time, well, our tax base is growing, Pittsburgh is growing. I mean, our tax base is growing with new home construction, new businesses. It has been growing. And people think, well, the school district is getting more money. No, remember, they've lowered the M&O tax rate. So the school district, we might get a little bit, maybe 1% or 2% out of it, but it's not much. So the way schools are funded, here's how our budget works. Our budget is based off our enrollment. Your budget is based off the number of kids you have in your district. Now, our enrollment hovers around 2,400 kids. Out of that 2,400, how many kids come to school every day? Attendance. That's called ADA, average daily attendance. That is what you get paid off of, not your exact enrollment. And that's why parents, that's why it's important for kids to come to school, because the schools are funded off attendance. You know, the enrollment doesn't matter if they're not coming to school. So the ADA, the average daily attendance, is set. That formula that the state figures for your ADA is multiplied by the number of those kids coming to school. Every kid has a price on his head.
Sure.
What I mean by that, the basic allotment, it's called the BA, is like $6,100 per student throughout the state of Texas. Then each student has different groups that are added to that, like if a student is in CTE, or if they're economically disadvantaged, or if they're in a special ed class or whatever. There's different weights added to that basic allotment. So every kid has a number to them. So you multiply that number by your ADA, and then that number gives us what's called our entitlement. What that means is this is what Pittsburgh ISD is entitled to. So once you figure that, let's just say that comes out to $20 million. Pittsburgh ISD is entitled to $20 million. That's how I set my budget. So they take that M&O tax rate, which is 85%, 85 cents. They figure it, how much of that 85 cents are you generating locally to pay toward that 20 million? And let's just say that comes out locally with our taxes and our tax base, we generate 12 million of that. Well, that still leaves 8 million short, us reaching our entitlement. That's where the state kicks in. They pick up the other half. So between the local M&O taxes and the state funding of it, they help you meet your entitlement. How many of you ever heard of the Robin Hood schools? Schools, the rich school districts.
That's what we were talking about yesterday.
Those school districts, basically what's happening there, their M&O taxes and their tax base, they're generating every bit of their entitlement, if not more. Let's say ours is 20 million. There may be some of them, those school districts may be generating 22 million locally, where they're 2 million over.
Right.
There. So that's where the Robin Hood came in. The state made them send some money back. Remember all that went on a few years ago? So that's how it works. So what do you think the state wants you to do locally? They want you to be able to fund more of that entitlement, so their part is less. So it's a balance. So we don't, because our tax base grows and we certify more values here and the valuation's gone up, and I get all that, mine too, that's not more money for schools. Yeah. You know, it all equals out and all evens out. And you know, it's a process. The valuations I know went up this year, but also the state kicked in. If you remember back in May, the homestead exemption passed an increase from $25,000 to $40,000. So everybody got a $15,000 bump in the homestead exemption if they file for it. I think that cost the district close to $40 million because we have to pay that. Because that's less money that goes, so it was about 40 million less that went to the district, just that bump in the homestead exemption.
So, go, you got
No,
something?
go ahead.
So real quick, I went to a visit at the high school where you spoke at, and you answered all the questions that were asked. Where's the next place you're speaking at there, Terry, that the people can come around and ask their questions and get them? Because I heard there's a rumor that they don't answer questions. I don't know. The one I was in, they answered all the questions.
Yeah.
I asked like 10 questions, and you didn't kick me to the curb one time. So I don't know. I just throwing it out there. So anyway.
No, we'll answer any question, anytime. And that's what I want people to do. I want them to answer questions because, again, like I said, I'm here to give you the facts. I'm here to give you everything that it is that, the district, we're trying to be upfront with everything that's going on and how these plans were set up and how everything was made. We have, actually, we're having 3 more community meetings. 2 weeks from now, we have a regular scheduled board meeting, so the community meeting is going to be on a Tuesday night at the junior high. Come tour the junior high, I think that's the 20th.
Okay.
Come tour the junior high at 5 o'clock, walk around, see it, and then we're going to meet at the cafeteria at 6 o'clock. 2 weeks after that, we're going to do another community meeting on the elementary intermediate campuses. Come tour those, come look around, see them, and then we're going to do the same thing, have a community meeting in the cafeteria on those campuses. And then the last meeting, 2 weeks after that, we'll be back at the high school. We're looking at maybe having that in that old gym, that everybody come in there and kind of see it and have one. So there's 3 more community meetings.
And I think that's a big deal because, I've seen on social media, I've also, listened to you talk about this. Transparency today is key. And when you say come to the campus and look at it, Elizabeth Reynolds say, go to the campuses and look at it before you make a decision. I mean, you got to get your hands up there. You got to see what's going on. And, like I said, I haven't been in the high school itself since 1989. And at that point, if nothing has changed really, I mean, what are we going to do? I mean, what are they? I don't understand what people expect when it comes to our kids. The kids are our future. We want to have what's best for them. I've heard people say, well, can we do half of it? Can we do a percentage of it? Can we get a grant for some and other? It comes down to this. It's not an expensive thing to do to change something that's going to be there for the next 40 years if you look at it as a 40-year investment. I think what people are looking at it is right now inflation's high, our home prices have gone through the roof, the country's paying more for gases, and this is just another one. But you can't just say, well, let's just push the kids down. That still has to be an important, and actually the most important thing, for the town is to keep the kids taken care of.
And I will say, on the aspect, I toured the campus, and I got a boy that's a senior, and I got 2 grandkids that's going to come up through this school system, and my son, he tells me, he said, Dad, I don't use the restroom at school. I wait all day and go home, always. And he runs home as soon as he gets home. And so I walk the campus in the main building, which, roughly 720 kids are in this building throughout the day, back and forth. At some period of time that they're flowing through each period, there's 5 male restrooms in the main campus. Stalls, 5 stalls, and 1 is a handicap. Wow. So if you got a broken leg or you're a handicap, you got to hobble your butt upstairs to do that, and hopefully it ain't occupied because there's only 2 in that bathroom, to be honest. And so that's just a challenge. And I think of this as if this was a restaurant or event facility that only had 5 for 720 people, we would already had the fire marshal there and say,
Well, and you're exactly right. It is an investment. It's an investment in your community. And again, I want people to realize that this committee worked hard. This is not an overnight thing. This was taking time. We started a year ago with interviewing architects and trying to find the right person and the right architect firm that would understand our district and the needs of East Texas schools, and some that have worked in East Texas schools, and getting professional opinions, not just the opinions of what the people in the district wanted as far as schools and campuses and teachers. And we mixed all those to come up with this plan. And it, there was a lot of thought put into that. And we understand it. And I understand, again, as a taxpayer in the economy. But if you look at it, none of us have a crystal ball, but if you look at the price of this bond, this time last year would have probably been about 50-something million. Yeah. the longer it's put off, and I get what's going on, it's going to be well over 100 million, you know.
The coach likes my analogy on
I
that.
do. And when we're talking about signing, we'll go over here. We're talking about signing Dak Prescott. If we'd have signed him 4 or 5 years ago when he first came up, we could have got him for
Yeah,
26,
exactly.
28. But then the market changed. So when we
Exactly.
did sign him, even though it was more than what some think, that was the market for the quarterback because you waited. And now you're going to keep waiting. It's not going to go down, Terry,
It's
in
not
3 or
going to.
4
Somewhere
years.
you
No.
have to bite the bullet.
Yeah.
And it'll be steep when you bite it, but the longer you wait, then it becomes astronomical.
Absolutely.
And
And
so,
our architect firm, and we have some other builders involved getting us prices and trends. It's not like we just pulled this figure out of the hat. And they're looking at bids that are going out currently in the construction world and kind of what that's been over the last year and where it may be headed in the next year or two. So there's a lot of thought put into that and trying to get the exact, right pricing for it. So.
I'm glad you came. We needed to hear it. And we're going to post this on as much as we can, let everybody.
so
Absolutely.
this will come out. Well, we'll talk about that in a
Yeah.
minute, but it'll be out soon. So real quick, Terry, is there any last thing you got to tell anybody here?
Well, no, I just think it's, if you have questions, like you said, come get the facts.
Yeah.
I'll be happy to talk to anybody anytime. Our committee would, our school board members would. We want people to know. We're trying to be as transparent as we can. I want everybody to know the process that we went through. I want them to know the needs of the district. I want them to come see it. And then get your facts, get all your information, and then, you vote how you feel like you need to vote at that time. But most definitely, come and ask questions.
And this is a November election, right?
Yes, November 8th.
There you
Good.
go.
So
All right.
with that right there, Terry, first of all, thank you for coming.
Yes, sir.
Bet.
Thank
We
you
really
so much.
appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
And I'm going to say from the coach,
To the vet.
it's time to stay tuned, stay tuned, stay tuned.